The next session is an hour and 15 minutes. So if it feels like the other ones have gone a little bit quick, we've got a little bit more time. We have 6 people for this panel session, so at any point if you want to start making your way up, I first want to introduce our moderator for the session, Mathieya Alatini. She is former chief from Tlingit First Nation. So if you would like to come up and join us for this session, so Mathieya will be moderating. Welcome, Mathieya. I can call everybody up, yeah. Do you want to sit on the moderator? That's the moderator. So I just met Mathieya a couple, maybe last week, through a recommendation from the advisory committee. So she has graciously offered to come in and facilitate this session. So this is a session on partnerships. So we've heard a lot about partnerships, relationships. So we're going to bring 3 different sets of partnerships up to share their experiences. So I want to call up Andrew Hall from Yukon Energy Corporation, Peter Kirby from Taku River Tlingit First Nation, Grant Sullivan from Nihtat Energy, Mike Ocko from Northwest Territories Power Company, Blaine Chislett from Sakku Investments, and Malek Tawashy from Kavalik Alternative Energy. So there's 2 pairs of 3 stories talking about partnerships, Indigenous partnerships and utility company partnerships and what is making them work. So I will pass it off to Mathieya to introduce the session and the focus for the conversation. And there is a clicker here for those that are giving presentations. It's fairly straightforward. Right button to advance, left to go back.
Thank you. Who's excited about meeting in person? Yay! I'm really short, so I can't see over the speakers. I'm going to stand up here. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very honored to be here. I was able to attend the last Renewables conference that was held here in Whitehorse, 2017. Yep. And in my previous life as a chief of Tlingit First Nation, we got to highlight a lot of the energy projects that we were doing in the Tlingit area. So very pleased to welcome you all here to the traditional territories of the Kwalindun First Nation and the Ta'an-Quechan Council. Those are Southern Shoshone territories, Southern Shoshone and Tagish Nation. And the Tlingit First Nation is also a Southern Shoshone nation, so it's sister nations. And yeah, part of our welcome is Dunjay. That means hello. So Dunjay, everyone. Hopefully you guys stay awake after that good lunch. Could we give a big round of applause to our cooks, please? Thank you for keeping us fed and sustenance. Food security is a big issue here in the north, and it goes hand in hand with energy self-sufficiency, energy sustainability, and all of that is built on relationships. So I'm really pleased to be introducing these fine gentlemen, all gentlemen, and getting cozy on these couches, I love it, and their projects throughout the north. So we have Andrew Hall and Peter Kirby, who will be talking about the Alatini Hydro Expansion Project, and Grant Sullivan and Mike Ocko, who will be talking about their overview of partnership projects in NWT, and Blaine Chislett and Malek Tawashy. Did I say that right? Thanks. And they're covering Nunavut and the partnerships in the Sakku Inuvialuit Corporation, Northern Energy Capital. So I believe we're going to start off with Andrew and Peter, so I don't know who's going first. Andrew, go ahead.
Great, thanks. Are there slides? There should be. Oh, there's a clicker up there. Okay, I'm going to go up there then. Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just start off with a few slides, just talking about the context of the project, and then hand things over to Peter to talk about some of the specifics and what the project really, the significance thereof for his First Nation and their path forward, and really then we'll conclude with some of the elements of the collaboration, and I think there's a number of different aspects that came to bear through time. So the broad context is obviously the climate change emergency, which has driven policy action at both the federal and territorial level through Our Clean Future, which is Yukon government's energy and climate change strategy, which really then set the parameters for Yukon Energy in terms of aiming for 97% renewable electricity supply on our main grid by 2030. Now, in conjunction with that is a real commitment, and you heard from our chair, Leslie Cabot, at lunch, but really a commitment and a recognition that partnerships with First Nations are critical to our energy future here in Yukon. And I would say in all of the large energy projects that we're going to build going forward will have some degree of First Nation ownership. And I'll go through what that spectrum might look like, but I think it's a recognition that a solely owned Yukon Energy project going forward is probably not on the cards in terms of new assets. So the text is a little small on this graph, but one of the challenges we face is with electrification and with growth in the Yukon in terms of population. We're facing a shortfall of capacity. So those of you in the energy business will know what that is. But really our ability to meet peak demand is, our system is really stressed when it's minus 40 out and everyone's at home cooking dinner. So we have a capacity shortfall, and we look at a particularly sort of emergency situation when we do this planning. But you can see the shortfall there in the gap between the gold line, which is our peak demand forecast, and the blue bars, which are our current resources. And this is sort of a winter worst case scenario type snapshot. So our 10-year renewable plan, which is our sort of look forward into the future, calls upon 3 projects, major projects to address the shortfall. And the Atlan Hydro project was the most near term of those. The other 2 are much earlier stage and still require a lot of work with the, largely the Caucasus First Nation, but also Taku Tlingit, Moon Lake pump storage, and some transmission in the Southern Lakes area to tie that all together. But hats off to Peter for putting a lot of years of work, bootstrap funded, and he'll talk more about that, to get the Atlan project quite far along before we ever really started engaging with actively. And so that immediacy of being able to potentially connect Atlan at the end of 2024 was really attractive to us, compared to a greenfield hydro, which, if we were starting from scratch, would be sort of 8 to 10 years. So, that fast to market feature of the Atlan project was really, really attractive for us. And that's before I even knew Peter and what a great guy he was, right? So, so if I look at Yukon Energy's approach to working with First Nations on collaboration, there's a wide spectrum of ways in which a utility does that, and we really sort of has built out this approach and strategy over the last couple of years, I would say. But it ranges from the one end to basic procurement and contracting type of opportunities, which we execute through our First Nation procurement policy. And then you get into progressive degrees of more ownership type situations. through Chapter 22 of the final agreement in Yukon, we have a means to offer debenture investments, which are largely financial instruments that we offer associated with YC projects. And so we've done that on a couple of different transmission line projects. In more recent history, on our LNG project, Kwalendon, it took a fairly sizable debenture on that project. And then the Whitehorse Battery project, likewise, for the two First Nations involved there. And then, of course, you move towards joint ventures and then full IPP First Nation ownership, which the Atlan project is. And so I think it's very much case specific in terms of what model works best, but I think directionally we're moving in the direction of the arrow. More deep involvement, more meaningful equity and decision-making ability on the part of the First Nation partner. So with that, I'll hand things over to Peter and he can walk through the project.
Ganeshish, do you believe this? I don't remember his name. Andrew, thank you. That's unbelievable, isn't it?
I just thought you got really emotional there, Peter.
I got to sit and absorb that for a minute. That's too funny. So yeah, it's just been great working with Andrew, now that I remember his name. You know, I'll just share a little bit. Andrew and I, when we first met, didn't get off on the best foot. It was a little challenging, and after working together and building a relationship, I can say that I've enjoyed working with Andrew. I respect Andrew and his team, that we've forged a relationship that is beneficial for, you know, I'll say the world, for clean energy, for the Taku River Tlingit First Nation is my responsibility, and for Yukoners in Canada, so in British Columbia, of course. It has been just an incredible journey. Taku River Tlingit First Nation took a risk in the first place when we started our project, first project, which is a 2.1 megawatt modified run-of-river project in Atlan. We deliver about 6 gigawatts of energy annually to about 300 households in Atlan. There's actually about 420 households in Atlan, but a good percentage of them are seasonal, so no demand in the winter months. So this is what our existing project looks like on Google Earth. You can see, you know, Surprise Lake off in a distance there. Got about a 200-meter drop down to Atlan Lake. The expansion project will be in that same valley, Pine Creek. It'll take water directly from Surprise Lake and deliver it, convey it down to a lower powerhouse a few hundred meters away from Atlan Lake. You can see there the pieces of infrastructure of our current project. And then, of course, we'll have a power line going from Atlan to connect to the Yukon grid at Jake's Corner. So benefits in small communities. So this is really, I think every First Nation in the land will, as much as we want clean energy and important things for the environment that has been long held in First Nation communities, we also need to change where we're at in society and Canadian society today. We need to catch up, you know, the metrics by which societies are measured. We need to get on the same place as every other Canadian. So long-term consistent revenue helps us do that. In sunny Atlan, we have a STEP program there, a skills training employment program that, you know, I heard speakers earlier today talk about capacity development. So important. Very big need in most, if not all, communities. Our skills training employment program met people where they're at, helped them overcome barriers that exist in their lives, and continually support and build self-esteem, build pride, build people, because that's the challenge. Capacity development that we did in the past on, put on a course for 3 weeks that's going to make somebody into an apprentice carpenter or something like that, results in people not succeeding. And it drills home a message to the individuals. Not all, but some. And certainly our target audience are folks that struggle. And so these projects are generational in nature. Revenues are generational in nature. And our ability to build the capacity we need to is what they provide to us. So we, of course, have built capacity on our contracting level and provide more employment opportunities to start the snowball of building capacity. On my last bullet there, Taku Wild and more fishers. I like to always include in any speaking engagement that I'm at, they ask people to pull out their pens and papers to write down www.takuwild.com, www.takuwild.com for the best salmon in the world. You've maybe tasted some of the salmon out there. It's like that, only maybe a little better. So what are we doing? I talked a little bit about this. Taku River Tlingit First Nation has a land use plan with BC government that is all about sustainable development, resource management. We're reviving culture. I have a few slides, not here today, but of a sailing canoe, pre-contact sailing canoe, Taku River Tlingit sailing in a Taku watershed. And then I have another one of a couple of years ago in Hakusti, a Tlingit celebration, inland celebration, where Teslin, Atlin, and Carcross all paddled from Atlin to Carcross for the celebration. So renewing practices, building pride, healthy people. So here we are on the last slide for us to talk about collaboration success. So another thing that people talked about a bit earlier today is I think Chris Henderson, where's the puck? Something like that. So we have, with Canada, BC, Yukon, developed a working model of collaboration on funding, on support for projects that is, I'll tell you, in all my over 20 years of writing proposals and trying to seek money for various projects in Taku country, this is it. Is everybody around the table working together cooperatively, knowing what each other is doing and what contributions can be made, what work needs to be done. It's just been a fabulous exercise. I don't know if Andrew, if you want to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, just maybe to drill into the different quadrants in that pie there. So the overall approach is that I think that collaboration was really necessary to move the project forward, and it took the shape of a number of different things. So funding, for example, Peter had done great work to gather federal funding to advance his early stages of development, even before Yukon Energy arrived at the table. But then there was a recognition quite early on that we needed quite a big funding stack to allow the project to move forward, and that was involving the Yukon government and the federal government. And so what YEC was able to do was just facilitate those conversations, and I think Peter and I went several times, either virtually or in person, to Ottawa to meet with the relevant departments. And I think that presenting that united customer and proponent face to the federal departments, I think was very powerful in terms of showing that the project was had a willing buyer and a capable and experienced proponent as well. But also, if we look at operation, for example, when you think about an isolated grid not connected to the North American grid, it's really important that Yukon Energy is able to dispatch the energy when we need it. And so we had to, and this took months, to figure out a scheme that allowed us to do that. And Peter can talk maybe during the Q&A about some design changes that were required to the project to allow for that flexibility so that we can call upon the power in a more flexible way. And then commercial terms, and our time is up, so I'll wrap up here. But when you're looking at such a big federal funding requirement, there's quite a bit of transparency that's required to figure out, well, how much funding is it? You know, so there was a transparency in the commercial negotiation that I'd not seen before. That was quite unique, and it took a while for our advisors to get comfortable with it. But I think when you're looking at quite a high degree of funding, you need that transparency around economics to make folks, you know, everyone comfortable that it's the right deal for everyone.
Break the thing. Thank you, guys. I just want to highlight a couple of items out of that presentation. When we're talking about changing dynamics and looking at relationship building, and these projects that are showcased today are looking at more than just the economics. It's looking at economic reconciliation. So as you were just talking about, the partnerships and that spectrum of how to participate and meeting people where they're at. Social reconciliation, so the idea of capacity development and meeting people where they're at. And this environmental reconciliation, that is really what the green energy projects are about. But when you can develop something that is economically sustainable and it contributes to the community well-being, you can see the impact, that the cultural impact, the revival that it can have on communities. I'm going to introduce the next panel speakers. So Grant Sullivan is the president of Nihtat. I'm like, that's not it. Nihtat Energy Limited. And he's got his background in project management, finance, and community liaison. He works and lived in the Beaufort Delta region and has been active in several Gwich'in organizations as a Gwich'in beneficiary. Mike Ocko, is the director of thermal divisions and is the chair of Canada Off-Grid Association. He is based in Inuvik, NWT. So I'm going to let you guys talk about your partnerships and the relationships on those projects. Yeah. And I think we have to hand over the clicker.
I got the clicker.
Okay.
I'll start off.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Those seats are way more comfortable than those seats you guys are sitting in. I have to start off. Yesterday was a great day. I really enjoyed. Oh, sorry. Put it a little closer. Yesterday was a really great day. I really enjoyed it. And considering I'm on the advisory committee, I should have made myself be in that session, not this one, because I'm not crazy about presenting live. But thanks, Dave, for pushing me wherever you are to do this. But yeah, great opportunity for Mike and I to kind of share a bit of our story, what we've been working on. We'll do the intros.
Okay. You want to?
Sure. So I'm Grant Sullivan. I'm the president of the Nihtat Energy Limited, primarily out of Inuvik, Northwest Territories. I'm from Inuvik, been there the majority of my life. NEL is 100% Indigenous owned. It's a sub of the Nihtat Corporation, which are the Gwich'in of Inuvik. And we're focused primarily on developing clean alternative energy in the Beaufort Delta, but also other areas in the north. Yeah.
And I'm Mike Ocko, director of the Northwest Territories Power Corporation, one of those utilities, and Crown Corporation owned by the GNWT. We serve 43,000 people in 33 communities across the NWT, and serve off-grid thermal communities in Beaufort Delta and the Decho Sawtooth also. So in working through this relationship here with Grant on the Nihtat, I now have a new colleague and a friend to work together on reducing diesel in various communities throughout the Northwest Territories.
Actually, and one little comment about yesterday's session. I was at Heather's Stilton's presentation yesterday, and I made me really appreciate Mike, because things are way easier with a mic in your life when you're dealing with utilities. So a little bit of the history where we started off. So this says 2016. It actually started off with the 2020 Catalyst program for me, and really that was my first kind of opportunity to kind of actually learn how to speak to a utility. And through this whole process, like that was one of the key things that I figured out how to do. We actually learned how to communicate together to get a project going. And a big part of that learning curve was in 2016, 2018. I just came off the Catalyst program, and I was super excited to do something renewable. And my First Nation gave me a shot. They said, well, yeah, you can go do that feasibility study, but we can't pay you, and we can't really support you, and we can't give you an office, but go ahead and do it. That'll be great. Yeah. Have a good time. And so I really learned a lot through that process, working with Mike and the GNWT to figure out where things were going. And I learned a lot about the Nuvik grid as well. And through that process, from there, the NEL then started working on a residential programs. So we installed 30 net metered homes. And we also did 2 net behind the meter systems in Nuvik. From there, through that whole process, engaging with NTPC quite a bit, we kind of came to the point of we need to kind of have some sort of formal relationship, and that's when in 2020 we entered into an MOU, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. 2021, we did the IPP for the Aklavik project, and in 2020, well, just last Friday, I'm happy to announce we actually signed the power purchase agreement for a 1 megawatt solar project in Nuvik, which is pretty amazing. So. It wasn't all perfect.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't easy. I mentioned earlier about the High Point project. NEL, the Nihtat were involved in the feasibility and the MAT tower. I've been to that site more times than I can count, and we were really actively engaged. This is where NEL really kind of came to be, because we realized that we need to be involved in these projects, not just as a consulting company coming in to do the work, but we actually need to kind of be involved long-term in these projects. And I mean, at the time, there was very limited opportunity for us to be involved in the High Point Wind project. But, you know, on the flip side as well, I'll admit, like, the residential program and the behind-the-meter projects aren't good for the utility either. So there was definitely, this was like the storming stage of the relationship. I wasn't involved in the wind project, but I was also hurting the utility with these behind-the-meter projects. So, like,
a little bit.
A little bit. But still, that was part of the discussion to have, though, where these are the cause and effects that are happening with these projects together. So then we decided to focus on common interests. Do you want to talk about the territorial, or?
Territorial objectives, sure. Yeah, so our objectives are, you know, electrical generation leaderships and Indigenous engagement. We have been trying to do that with the GNWT government due to COVID. Naturally, that's slowed us down, but we will definitely be going out there now into communities and meeting like with Paulatuk and various other communities in the Northwest Territories, and we want to work together to find solutions and community engagement, participation, and empowerment, and want to hear from the communities what their reduction programs or what they want to do to reduce the fossil fuels in these communities. So it's we definitely want to move forward.
And then on NEL planning objectives, like, we were basically in line with the territorial government. We just need to figure a way how to do it together, which was the challenging part of the process. I mean, we definitely want to make sure there's Indigenous participation in all the utility projects. How do we get all the benefits that stay in the community? And really, like, how does the Indigenous population actually play a meaningful role in climate mitigation at the community level? Which brings us to the Memorandum of Understanding. So we signed this November 2019. Basically, it was a framework of how do we actually work together. What are the areas we actually have some synergies together we can kind of figure out? what's the purpose, the scope, forms of cooperation. The forms of cooperation, it was really interesting because we didn't actually know what that was and what we could actually do for each other, and how we could actually work together, and like different resources that I could bring in to the fold, and different resources that Mike could bring in, and how we could actually make that work. Because I'm sure it's a consistent message for anyone developing projects is you really do need to kind of rely on the local people there to get these projects done.
And with turnover in the government and also in the GNWT, and the Power Corporation at the senior level, it was, Grant and I decided the best way forward was to just develop an MOU, and then that will go forward with various projects, as we have done.
And so the next few slides are just about the different projects that we've actually completed with this MOU side. So the first one is this 150 kilowatt IPP in Aklavik. So that's actually the Aklavik slide there. So that's, the great thing is that you can see the river in the background. So this is my mom's hometown, and like half my family is from Aklavik, which is great. And my mom goes to her cabin by that river, and that's my project, which is pretty amazing to see. It's a cool kind of connection. So it was constructed last year in 2021. We're working on the commissioning now, and we're hopeful that this will be operational this summer. 150 kilowatts, 254 megawatt hours, 150 tons of greenhouse gas, and these revenues are going to be derived through an IPP.
Yeah, and we currently already had 54 kilowatts installed on the generation plant. We do have a variable speed generator in that community, so we're trying to see that technology to its maximum to see if we can actually see the full penetration as the supplier says. So this will get us about up to about 55%, right? Somewhere in that area. I do like to add that where the solar panels are, that was going to be our fuel site for storage, just in case the supplier in Fort McPherson didn't commit to. So we actually transferred the lease to the Nihtat, so that's another working together. So he didn't. The Nihtat had a space to put their solar panels right beside the power plant.
And the solar panels look way better than the tank farm, right?
Oh, yeah, way better. And again, teamwork, we can decrease in the timelines to complete a project. And that's what we're talking about, is excelling. So here's where I like to say to my friend Grant, you know, we were talking about small steps, and he went from 150 kilowatts to 1 megawatt. After I said, you know, the next project, let's do it small. So I guess that's small to Grant,
That's
1
small.
megawatt.
Yeah, that's going to be small for now, Mike.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, we now have the signed IPP for a 1 megawatt solar project in Inuvik. It's actually, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of that map there, the circled in purple, that's all now, that lot right there is all full of crates and crates of solar panels. There's something like 5,000 solar panels, and it's just crate after crate after crate of solar panels. It's really kind of neat to see. Like, people are asking, like, what are those doing there? So the procurement is all complete. The construction's planned for this summer. One note on this project for the construction. So last year I was able to train 8 locals to do the Canadian Space Agency solar project. Now those 8 folks are actually going to be working on this project as well too. We've actually been able to reduce the amount of people coming in to work on this project, like from down south. So we really actually are developing a lot more local capacity, like with the project partners we have in place, which is great. So we're planning to get this commissioned next spring. So it's going to be a pretty busy summer in Inuvik, and really going to change the landscape.
Yeah, and we have had various meetings on both projects all through the time with our engineering department and Grant's engineering support, and that's worked very well together. So, you know, it's been a very collaborative relationship to move projects forward.
And definitely like that relationship of where are the gaps in both of the parties, and how do how do we address them together? Like, that's the whole key. Like, how do we actually figure this out together to actually get the product that I want and get the product that Mike wants at the end? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I think that really showcases how that willingness to work together and have those candid conversations can move mountains. Like to go from, 150 kilowatts to 1 megawatt, and in such a short time frame, and setting the foundation. We're just getting you guys some water here, because we are here for a bit. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. No, I have a water bottle. Came prepared. So our next group, or our next partnership project is Blaine Chislett, as Inuit beneficiary from Rankin Inlet, is in central Nunavut. He is of the Sakku Investment Corporation and Kivalliq, did I say that right? Kivalliq Alternative Energy as the energy project and maintenance manager. And beside him, Malek Tawashy is the director of Kivalliq Alternative Energy, a renewable energy development corporation focused on reducing fossil fuel consumption in Nunavut's Kivalliq region. So I don't know who's going first. Are you guys going to take the podium too? And I'm just going to suggest that for the people that are in the other room and online, if you can pull the mic as close to possible as possible. Thank you.
Slides should be. Oh, there we go. Sweet. Okay, thank you for having us. Thanks for having us present. So Blaine and I are here today to talk about Kivalliq Alternative Energy. Kivalliq Alternative Energy is an Indigenous partnership focused on clean energy production and fossil fuel reduction in the communities of the Kivalliq region. And it's made up of
7 communities with roughly 10,000 Inuit beneficiaries who are underneath our birthright organization, the Kivalliq Inuit Association. And we at Sakku, or the business arm here, was here just to stretch it all out and make sure our beneficiaries are benefiting from any investments we do have out there.
And it's a partnership between Sacramento Investments Corporation and Northern Energy Capital. A little bit more about Sacramento Investments.
So some more about Sakku Investments. It's a development corporation of the Kivalliq Inuit Association. We represent, like I said, over 10,000 Inuit in our slice of heaven. And we have 7 communities that range from the lower end of Ukvet all the way up to Coral Harbor and Nihtat. There's a slide there. We are in central Nunavut. On the bottom there you can see Ukvet, Well Cove, Rankin Inlet, Chesterfield Inlet, Baker Lake, Nihtat, and Coral.
And we'll hear about a few more of those communities as the presentation goes on. And Northern Energy Capital. Northern Energy Capital is a renewable energy development company that's committed to really empowering communities in their transition from fossil fuel consumption to clean energy asset ownership. And Northern Energy Capital is a Yukon company and focusing and specializing in project development and financial structuring of clean energy projects. So a little bit more about the partnership. So Kivalliq Alternative Energy has 3 main mandates. One is reduce carbon emissions within the communities through a variety of different methods, which we'll share a little bit more about, training and capacity building, and increasing clean energy production in the communities as well. And Kivalliq Alternative Energy is really committed to promoting engagement and community participation within the communities.
Yeah, with our effort with the community engagement here, we did pan out and we did supply a few of our communities with home energy packages just to some of the consumption of the diesel fuel. And just to paint it out a little bit clearer for everyone to install them, we did make some YouTube videos that are currently translated into both languages, English and Inuktitut, and it's just makes it a little bit easier for the homeowners just to install these limited items.
And I think Blaine gets stopped in the airports now as the YouTube star of those home energy installations.
That's one of the lighter things I get stopped for, we'll put it that way.
Awesome. So we were reflecting, on what makes the partnership a win-win. And, I certainly was reflecting as well, and Blaine, and we'll just go through a couple of them. Certainly moving at the right pace, from our side, and really understanding what it means to develop a renewable energy project in a community that, may never have seen solar panels, may never have seen wind turbines. And we appreciate that, accomplishing great things in the north, takes time, and it takes the right amount of time. So going at a pace that makes sense for the community and for our Inuit partners is something that really makes this a win-win.
Yeah, working with Malek was a real win-win. I really appreciate him because he understands the cultural sensitivity with my people in the north. As soon as something fails, it's hard to bring it back off the ground. So when I said we have to slow down a little bit, he was all game with that, and he did bring in other partners, or other people in with us that did help us proceed in the right path.
Yeah, and really learning from each other too. It's like understanding what resources exist in the communities and what resources don't. Prime example, a little bit at the risk of sort of bathroom talk, is one of our estimators called Blaine and said, Blaine, so for porta potties for our project, our construction of our wind turbines, do you have those we can rent? And Blaine said, no, we don't have those here.
No, it's limited.
And then she interpreted that Sakku doesn't have them. She said, okay, I get that you don't have them, but we'll just rent them from a local rental company. And I think the answer was, no, there aren't any at all. So we were like, okay, so what are we doing on site for bathroom breaks? So learning a little bit about what's available, what's not available, has definitely been an area that we're learning from each other, especially when it comes to construction and development of projects in small and remote communities. And that's where Blaine and Sakku has, one of the areas, been a tremendous asset. And also, mutual support, supporting each other's decision-making process. So being a private sector company has a different decision-making process than a development corporation with the Kivalliq Inuit Association as the shareholder. So appreciating that there are different things to consider, as well as different timeline for decisions to be made, and really respecting that as well has been something that strengthened our partnership. And of course, the long-term vision. Creating ownership opportunities and have these are long-term projects, clean energy projects, and really being committed to our partners winning in the long term. This is not an overnight project. This is going to be something that's going to be within the community for a very long time. So structuring the partnership that has our partners really win in the long haul.
All right.
Did you want to share
Well,
your mom's comments?
Okay, yeah. My mom passed away a couple of months ago, and she was one of the creators of the Nunavut Landscape Agreement. She's actually the second signatory to make Nunavut our land. So she was real big, and she was always a big push on this. And I'll just share a quick quote that she had here. She said, "We did not inherit the lands and waters from our ancestors. We are preserving and borrowing it from our children for their children and their future generations." So it's really close to my heart, this whole alternate energy here and renewables, just to keep our land clean.
Thank you. A few things that make our partnership unique. It's funny because I asked Dave, I was like, Blaine and I we work in the day-to-day, and so, it's like, you ask a fish, like, what's the water like? The fish is like, what water? Like, So, we're in it working, and it's like, what does make our partnership unique? And I think one of the things we reflected on is that, it's a brand new partnership in an emerging market, and also one of the geographic differences. I mean, Northern Energy Capital is a Yukon company. I'm based in Vancouver. Blaine is in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut. So, our partnership really geographically spans coast to coast. And I think that's one thing that's unique from our other partnerships that we've heard from today. Also, you know, it came up quite quickly.
Yeah, it came up quite quickly. One day, I was getting involved with the 2020 Catalyst program, which I totally love and suggest as many people could go as they can. And then, I believe it was Kevin Sanguin pointed Malek to my direction, and then it was from the handshake there, we started evolving into the partnership we have today, which has been working out for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been working on this. Yeah. So it's been a blast. COVID or not, we've enjoyed it, and we've been able to pan it out pretty well.
Okay, so what I think we do is share a little bit about, with the time that we have left, not only some of the work that the partnership has completed successfully to date, but also look ahead to the projects that we're taking on. So through the support of the IODI program, our partnership successfully completed 2 community energy plans, one in Nihtat and one in Coral Harbour. And also through that process, we've completed resource assessment studies in Rankin Inlet, Baker Lake, upcoming resource assessment studies are Rankin Inlet, Baker Lake, Chesterfield Inlet, and Whale Cove, as well as system integration studies and 4 implementations plans for projects that are on our horizon. So there's 4 key projects on the horizon for the Kivalliq Alternative Energy. Rankin Inlet and Baker Lake, both are wind projects, so those will be between 1 and 2 megawatts of wind. Rankin Inlet is projected to displace 1 million liters of diesel per year, representing about 30% of the current energy demand displaced. Baker Lake, also a wind energy project, about 675,000 liters of diesel displaced per year, producing 25% of the current energy demand. And the 2 solar projects that our partnership is working on together in both Nihtat and Coral Harbour, those are 1 megawatt in size, complete with battery storage, and those will be close to 400,000 liters of diesel displaced per year, representing about 30% of those 2 communities' current energy demand. So all in all, I think we're making a dent in the numbers that Dave Lubkin had shared this morning. So together, per year, almost 2.5 million liters of diesel projected to be displaced in these 4 projects in the Kivalliq region of Nunavut. Some of the next steps to watch for. So I spoke about the 2 solar projects in Nihtat and Coral. So our targets this year is to get those projects to shovel ready. So complete all the integration studies, the electrical engineering, the civil engineering, as well as the Class A construction estimates, as well as advancing development activities for both the Rankin Inlet and Baker Lake wind energy projects. And we're also completing 2 more wind resource assessments in Chesterfield Inlet and Whale Cove.
All right, that was lit.
That's the last slide.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's such an amazing partnership that spans across the north. That's huge, and to see the diversity in the communities and the diversity in the projects is amazing. So congratulations on that partnership. We're going to go into the question and answer period. We're going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to ask these guys a question, and then I think we'll take one from the longhouse, or sorry, from the other room. Pointing to the other room. And then we will do an online one, and then we'll take questions from this room. So, as you guys were talking about the different partnerships, you're all in different states, and I know, like Peter, the project in TRTFN has been an ongoing project. I think I've been there throughout a lot of those conversations and watched it grow. I'd like to get some reflection on the different states of the relationship and just marrying that Indigenous way of knowing, doing, and being, so that Indigenous, like thinking of 7 generations, your mom's lesson. How do you integrate that traditional way of thinking and marry it with that kind of the corporate side, so the economics, and making it make sense to the investors and the banking. And maybe you can just share a little bit of that, and I'm going to throw it to Peter first, and then anybody else that wants to answer. Thanks.
Yeah, Gundershish, for that question. This is, I guess, a question that's embedded in everything that Taku River Tlingit First Nation does. And so, you know, we have a land use plan in with BC, and that land use plan was constructed with information from elders from the 70s, from the 80s, in the 90s when it was negotiated, and so there's guidance. It's a guidance document about what we can or should do, and some people may know that the Taku River Tlingit First Nation had a court case with Canada and British Columbia back in 2004 and joined with the Hyde, and it resulted in a consultation and accommodation Supreme Court decision in 2004. In that time, our people have a way of making decisions for our communities called a joint clan meeting. So in that joint clan meeting, what we learned, what we decided, I should say, after a lot of discussion, is we need to do what our ancestors have done for years, and sustain ourselves. And sustain ourselves in today's world. In as much as we support people in cultural activities with the proceeds of the existing Hyde project, and celebration inland and on the coast and other things, and continue cultural practices, we need to be able to sustain ourselves and future generations. So when you know, we talk about future generations, part of our Canadian construct so far has been, well, you know, certainly generations have operated where Indigenous people were pushed off to the side and weren't part of the economic enterprise in Canada. They're seen as an obstacle. And so today, and certainly in our project, as I think is a good example of not pushing the Indigenous community off to the side, but embracing and recognizing rights and title, recognizing that, you know, as Andrew said, participation by Indigenous communities is vital in the creation of clean energy. It's not going to happen without Indigenous ownership, Indigenous involvement. It's just not going to happen. So that's what we're trying to do in Atlan, is provide a new reality, if you will, of Indigenous prosperity, Indigenous clean energy in this case. Everything that we do is about trying to think about what are the next 7 generations and beyond are going to do, which is what is so beautiful about clean energy projects, is that they are generational. So they provide a reliable source of revenue for, in our instance, at a joint clan meeting, to decide what we do with that, and what kind of investments we make, and how we continue to practice our culture, our traditions, in imposing our values on our land, rather than have others come in and impose their values.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the reconciling corporate buy-in with Indigenous values? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think I mean, there's a couple of different ways in which that's brought to bear. This project was unique in that you know, a lot of where those traditional values first are considered is during the project assessments and the environmental assessment, which we had no role in. I mean, that was Peter's part of the project as the proponent. So we weren't really involved in how those Indigenous values were brought forward into the BC environmental assessment process, for example. But where I can comment is when it came to certain elements of the contract negotiation, you know, it was very clear that, you know, Peter was bringing forward certain perspectives that we really had to get our head around in terms of what his community needed to see from the deal. And frankly, what Peter, I think you needed to sell your deal to your community. And so we had to be flexible to understand, oh, okay, well, that's why a certain price mechanism needs to get set up a certain way, which might not have been the way we would have done it, but it's just recognizing that Peter needed, he had to you know, reflect his community's values in certain parts of the commercial transaction. So that's an example of where it's coming to mind.
Thank you. Does NWT, have you guys had any experience with trying to reconcile that, I guess, that pedagogy?
I can't speak for like the overall reconciliation side of things, but a few stories. I mean, I talked about my president of the Nihtat giving me a shot, and he was like, no, go start, do this. And it's actually, I'm looking at Richard Narasu. Richard and I worked, like it was my first job, I think. We were talking access benefit negotiations, and we met with Imperial Oil, and it was this big deal, and I was pretty young, and I was talking about, you know, we're a Gwich'in beneficiary. And Richard looked at me, and I went, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. With the break happened, and Richard gave me shit, and he said, Grant, you're not a beneficiary, you're a Gwich'in participant. You're active. You belong in this. So that really stuck with me, so. Yeah.
And I guess for the Power Corporation, you know, I've always been, since the Pan-Canadian Summit, always been, you know, looking for ways to do reduction in diesel fuel in our communities. One thing that I can say that I led with this MOU inside our organization was to have Grant lead with the MOU. Basically, he led it. We didn't make any real major changes. We looked at it, seeing that we could work with that, and that's where we went forward with. So it's been a good working relationship, like we say, and we look to I look for further projects with the Nihtat and other communities in the Northwest Territories, and our doors are open. We have just new leadership too. And the CEO is Corey Strang. He is born and raised in the Northwest Territories. Our Chief Operating Officer is also born and raised in the Northwest Territories. So we definitely, now's the time, and we have some momentum. So let's continue on working with the communities.
That probably makes a big difference, hey, the fact that you have locals involved in the process.
Yes, it does, and they, you know, they born and raised in the Northwest Territories. So yes, I have values that are very deep to myself. So that's what, you know, helps too with our relationship. So. Yeah.
Did you guys have? Oh, you get your own.
You don't get that.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I can offer. Our partnership is a little bit unique as well from the other two, I just realized, in the sense that, so the Sakku and Northern Energy Capital joint venture, so we're really on the same side. We're on the team that will be negotiating those IPP contracts with the utility. So Blaine and I together. And that conversation is still very early. So with respect to the partnerships conversations with the utility, a little bit early to comment in great detail. But I can say when it came to structuring our joint venture, the synergies of the resources and skill sets that Sakku brings, and the synergies and the skill sets and the resources that NEC brings, it was very evident in the MOU. I mean, I think we had maybe 2 or 3 track changes in about like a 20-page MOU and partnership agreement when the partnership got formed. So Sakku's been tremendous to work with in terms of creating that partnership, and we've really just thrived ever since.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, with working with Malek here, it was quite painless most days, on my end anyways, so that worked out well. But the diversity in the skill sets that Sakku has and Northern Energy Capital, we were so well-rounded that it was just our push towards the IPP is going to be fairly quick, I'm hoping. We all are, all of us are. But it's just, we have such a nice broad workforce to push towards it for our beneficiaries in my region.
Thank you. Do we have questions in the multipurpose room?
Any questions for any of the panelists? No, thanks. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay, and do we have any on the HUVA? Yep. Okay. What were there challenges to Indigenous partnership financing, and if yes, how did you overcome them? So, I don't know. Thanks, Peter.
So, hello. Yeah. Our first project, I'll say in 2009, it was amazing and incredibly steep learning curve for me with our senior lender in downtown Toronto and going up to like the 40th floor in some high rise. And it was interesting, the representative of the lender 5 years audited statements from all entities related to Shake Limited Partnership. Shake is the owner of the first project. First, he said, this is the first time we've ever loaned to a First Nation. We don't usually do that. And so your audited statement shows a deficit in housing. Why? Right? And so, well, it was worse before. That was my answer. It's getting better. And here's why. And so walked through that, got the lending. So, it is really interesting to think about the challenge. And I'm grateful to hear Canada talk about making things easier and more of a team approach. Because it's just layered and layers and layers and layers of challenge that First Nation communities that many Canadians don't understand. A simple thing like that, like borrowing money, and it's like the first thing is housing. And housing is like, that's the core, the need that everybody needs. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can afford to pay the rent, great, but if you can't, you still need a house to live in. And the social reality for many Indigenous people across this whole country is such that it is a challenge to pay the rent every month, and generationally. And so recognizing that and wrapping your mind around that, accepting that, and then getting on the team to address that challenge. That's what we're doing. As a side job, we're building a hydro project. But that's really what we're doing. And I think it's really important for all the people who participate in these enterprises know that as much as it's about clean energy, as much as about all of these things that this conference is actually for, the building of societies and building people is really the enterprise that's certainly in the minds that I've been instructed by our citizens to work toward, and I think what many communities are doing.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to add to that one? Financing, First Nation financing. Go ahead. Do I remember it? Can we put the question back up on the screen? It's about overcoming barriers with Indigenous financing.
Okay, cool. I think when I saw the question, the answer for us was, has there been any challenges with Indigenous financing or and so far I would say no from our side, but I do think that's one. Sorry, I was looking to see if the question was back up. But I do think that's one of the strengths of our partnership. Definitely, Northern Energy Capital brings the opportunity to bring. Thank you for posting it. Whether it be private equity or private debt, institutional financing. I mean, I think that's one of the strengths of our partnership in bringing different creative solutions to structuring clean energy projects, whether it be through government funding, institutional financing, or even private investment and private equity.
Okay, go ahead.
I didn't have any trouble with the financing, but I think this is one of the things that the partnerships can actually really benefit from. Like the Aklavik project, for example, they put in the VSG. The VSG was there, the variable speed generator. They needed like another 150 kilowatts of solar to actually test this system, but they didn't have the financing to do it. It's a really good way of showing like how we can actually partner together to figure these things out. Like where I can manage the financing side of it and get the support that I need to actually build that project, and thereby actually testing something that the utility wants to do for the benefit of like all the Gwich'in participants that live in Aklavik. So it's a really, to me, it's one of the biggest opportunities to actually expand on between utilities and First Nations of how do we actually grow that relationship more, where we can actually share that risk and that liability of developing these, you know, high Arctic renewable energy projects in a really short window of time.
Yeah, and just to add to that, with the Indigenous financing, for our customers, it holds the rates, right? Right? Eventually lower the rates once we get rid of that dirty diesel fuel, but we'll see where that goes. So
I think that's a win for everybody if you can do that. I'm wondering, we got a question in the room. Mike?
Hi, thanks. So my question is to the teams that are entered in or already done their power purchase agreements, because in Manitoba, we're about to enter into our negotiations with Manitoba Hydro on behalf of Saisi Dene First Nation. And Hydro makes us sign all kinds of documents that we won't tell anybody what rate they're going to offer. And they've done that twice with two other First Nations in Manitoba. I don't know why they do that, but I guess my question is, how do you get ready for negotiations? Because obviously they're in the driver's seat when it comes to what they're going to offer. We want to make sure that we're getting the best we can for our client, the First Nations. So I'll just throw that out there to anyone.
I think Grant and then Andrew.
Just no more. You have to understand, like, when I was mentioning the behind-the-meter projects, those, I needed to understand completely what that meant to the utility. What does that actually cost them? I needed to understand their fixed costs, their variable costs, and so we went through the process of actually going through the PUB application to actually figure what those variable costs were. What are the actual rates by community that we're looking at doing? So having a good understanding of, like, I didn't come to the table saying I want 75 cents a kilowatt because I knew they couldn't afford it. But I did come to the table with, this is the variable cost, this is where you're actually at, this is the efficiency, this is of the generators. Show the understanding of what the utility is actually going through, and getting to that, how do we both get to some sort of benefit out of this project? Like the 1 megawatt project is a good deal because it's providing a guaranteed price to the utility for the next 25 years. Like, and it's consistent, and it's not reliant on an aging Dempster highway to get up fuel, an aging fleet of barges, or natural gas well that's collapsed. So it's about energy security, and finding that common ground, because Mike wants to keep the lights on, so do I. So how do we figure that out where we both can get some benefits out of it? So basically just understand where your community is and what the cost of that power generation in that community actually is.
Andrew? Or Peter?
Yeah, sure. What's the question again?
Talking about getting ready for negotiations for a power purchase agreement with a big bully, which is our utility.
Yeah, this guy, whatever his name is, I know what you're talking about. In our energy purchase agreement, we have the ability to inform all of our shareholders, the citizens of the Taku River Tlingit First Nation. So we do that through the joint clan meeting. And so as Grant said, knowing you know, the details, the nitty-bitty bits, knowing all that, and then sharing it with our citizens allows us to be informed of not only the detail, but what our citizens think about what that is, and gets us back at the table knowing where we stand. And so the bully, if you will, is only as big as you let him be. And I'll say, if you have the same knowledge and your goals are the same to reduce greenhouse gases, to provide clean energy, you're going to wind up in a place where both parties are happy, accepting. You'll have a deal. But you know, from our perspective, our needs need to be met. And if they're not met, then we don't have a deal. And I'm sure it's the same for Andrew. And so that's just the road. And Andrew has lost hair over this, I'm sure.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I'll talk as the bully. I didn't feel like a bully, I can tell you 90% of the time. Yeah, I mean, it's odd that the utility's answering the question, but Peter had really good advisors. I mean, he had individuals working for him that it wasn't their first rodeo, and they'd heard all the BS before from the utility. So great advisors. And also, I think from the utilities perspective, understand where the value is for us. And I think, you know, Grant spoke to that is, you know, I would encourage the proponent or the developer to really understand every electron that you feed to us, how is that helping Yukon Energy? And that was a long conversation, because you have to understand how our power grid works. And we spent a lot of time talking about where the benefit was for us and where it wasn't. But I think that helped us get to a deal that worked for everyone.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's same sort of answer said differently is how can you make the pie bigger? So as opposed to just looking at the rate, is there a bigger picture that your project offers the utility from their mandates and what's important to them to look at? I think that's what Andrew was suggesting as well.
Nice. I think we have time for one more question, maybe two.
My question is related to utilities legislation. You've obviously made these projects work across a variety of jurisdictions under different utilities acts and regulations. Is there any need to upgrade the legislation to make this process easier for you? Or can the existing legislation work adequately?
Go ahead, Grant.
I didn't follow the regular path through legislation. I just did it. And truthfully, like the way we approached it was like we saw it. We both agreed there is a need for this project to happen. And okay, how do we make this work? So like we were drafting this stuff ourselves to do a power purchase agreement. We figured out what was the right process for us to make this project work. And yeah, it took like the starting. I actually had a really good conversation with Heather still in just a few days. Like, how did you start doing this? How did you start? And we got all the facts. Like that's where we started. We understood the community. We understood what from the utility side of what they actually needed, how it was going to work. And truthfully, once you got to that point, like they wanted to do the project just as much as we did. And so the PPA just kind of came out as a result. Like, so there wasn't no big broad legislation swooping thing. We just figured it out because we thought this is good for everybody here. Let's just make this happen.
Yeah, I agree with your question there that yes, all jurisdictions should have their policies completed. I know we're just in our final stages with the GNWT, but for utility, what we look at is you know, the avoided diesel fuel cost and avoided maintenance costs for renewables, right? We have to be fair to all our customers in various areas. We basically don't have a rate for each community, so it can't be specific. We have to think about all the other communities because the thermal division has one rate for all the communities. So That's the way we look at it, the avoided diesel fuel costs and the maintenance costs.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I think in Yukon, there's a couple of different ways to look at the path forward. For this specific project, we knew there was no chance that the regulatory regime was going to change or framework. So we knew how we needed to sell the deal to the regulator. And that was a lot of what the conversation was about, is where the regulator was going to determine the value for the utility. And frankly, the role of the grant funding, in a part, is to make up that difference. Because we can only pay so much, and if the project economics needs support, that's where grant funding plays a very meaningful role. So that was a little bit around the approach of, well, how much grant funding does the project need to move forward, given the way the deal is going to be reviewed by the regulator? So that was kind of the thought process. I think longer term, yeah, I mean, Yukon's talking quite a bit about reform of our Public Utilities Act. It's an action under our Clean Future is for government to reopen that act at some point. But I can tell you that what will be coming fairly soon, we believe, is a Clean Energy Act here in Yukon, which will mandate us to reach a certain percentage renewables on the grid. And that's going to change the game quite a lot, because suddenly the avoided cost of diesel, which Mike talked about, may not be the benchmark by which we compare and benchmark economics. And so the passing of that Clean Energy Act will be a big step towards the regulatory reform that you're perhaps thinking about.
Thank you. Did you guys have anything from Nunavut? Okay. I think we're on time, and we don't have any time for any more questions. If you could please join me in giving these guys a round of applause. Thank you. And you're excused.
That was awesome. It's so great to hear of the partnerships, the win-win-wins. Thank you, everybody, for coming up and sharing your thoughts. That was really, really great. I appreciate that, and thank you for moderating.